Hey you guys, welcome to Crafts with Miss Chelsea. I'm Miss Chelsea and today we're working on Firefly Terrariums. You will need the following: a mason jar, sand, rocks, moss, fairy lights, tape optionally, and tweezers. So let's get started. As you can see, I have all of my supplies next to me, but right now I'm just going to focus on the sand and the mason jar. So the first thing I'm going to do is open my jar and open my sand. I'm going to try and pour it in as carefully as possible. You want to pour it slowly so that it doesn't spill everywhere. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pour in half, shake my jar, and then pour the rest in. Now that we have our sand in the jar, we're going to try and insert our moss. This is synthetic moss, which means it's not real, but it makes a nice decoration for this situation. I'm using my tweezers to put the moss in place because this is a jar and my hands are kind of too big to fit perfectly in. If you have smaller hands, you won't need the tweezers, but if your jar is narrow and your hands are a bit bigger, it might be better for you to just use tweezers to get things in place the way you want it. I'm showing you this in a sped up manner, but it's best to take your time when you're inserting the moss and also the other materials because you're going to want it to have a certain look. I put in half of my moss and then I started to insert my rocks. I did this because I wanted to layer it a bit. I wanted to add in some rocks and I was trying my best to make sure they were on the sides of the glass so that they're visible. I don't recommend just pushing everything in at once because although it's easier that way, it's just visually better to take your time. The center of your jar isn't always visible, so it's best to make sure that you can see everything on the outside of the jar. So when you're making your jar, it's best to look on the sides rather than just looking at it from an aerial position. I'm looking at mine sideways, although you guys can't see that I'm doing it like that. Make sure that you're looking at it from the sides and not just from the top. This is a project that is subjective, meaning you guys are going to see it differently than how I see it. When you create your jar, it'll be up to you whether or not it looks good. Be sure that you spin your jar occasionally just so that you see if you're evenly distributing things or if you like how it looks from all angles. This is another good reason not to use all your materials in one go. Once you've finished with all of your materials, you can set your jar to the side and you'll now need your lights and your lid. So the lights, the way you know that it'll work is this plastic slip will be pulled out and that's how it'll turn on. If the slip is in place, the lights won't turn on. So make sure that you take that piece of plastic out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape the controller to the lid of the jar. This gives me the opportunity to have this out of the way. It's not necessary to tape it, but I just think that it makes for a better visual. Now that we have our control attached, I'm going to unravel the wire. I wanted the lights to be mostly at the top of the jar because these are going to represent little fireflies. So I waited until I put in the moss and the rocks and sand so that they sat on top instead. But in other terrariums, you could actually add the lights coil as you add the sand. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply just going to, as best as I can, unravel the coil of lights and put them into the jar. Alright, and now I'm going to flip the switch. And now we have our fireflies in our jar. I adjusted the lights just a little bit because when I twisted the jar, they got a bit twisted inside of the jar. For the most part, I'm finished. I think it came out pretty good, don't you? So what have we learned? We learned how to create an ecosystem, how to work with a new medium, and the importance of details. Thank you so much for joining, and as always, see you next time.